The backside 50-50 position began to grow in popularity after Lachlan Giles used it successfully in ADCC, and Ryan Hall was able to use it to submit BJ Penn in the UFC. With more and more people using this position, it's important for us to understand how to defend it. So the goal of this video is an introduction into how to defend the backside 50-50 position. First, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of 50-50. Then we're going to talk about what I think is the first mistake people make when it comes to the backside 50-50 entry, kind of an early mistake that you can prevent. Then number 3, we're going to talk about a later mistake that people tend to make when defending the position. And 4, we're going to talk about an outside spin versus an inside spin. And before we get into the video, just a quick reminder, I will be giving away a $50 BJJ Fanatics gift card to one of you all if we reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you are subscribed, please share, and let's get into the video. So what are some pros and cons of the 50-50 position? A pro is that it's a very solid connection to our opponent. So if they were trying to rip their leg straight out, it's going to be very difficult for them to do that because there's a sharp bend in their leg due to our inside leg. So it's very good at controlling our opponent and keeping them in the position. When you compare that to inside Senkaku, it's relatively easy for our opponent to straighten their leg and begin their escape from the inside Senkaku position. Now, because there is such a tight connection in the 50-50 position, it typically gives our opponent the ability to reach our head or our hands to defend against the heel hook. So that's a downside of the 50-50 position. But the beauty of the backside 50-50 is that our opponent is no longer facing us. So they have no ability to use their hands to control our head or hand fight to prevent heel exposure. On top of that, the backside 50-50 position still has the benefits of creating that sharp bend in the leg, making it difficult for our opponent to run away, and also making it difficult for them to put weight back into us because of the top leg here, which is able to push them away to keep their weight off of us while we dig for the heel. Now, if we look at Muhammad Ali, who was one of the victims of Lachlan Giles in ADCC, but is also an IBJJF champion and does a lot of training in the gi. And when we're taught to pass De La Riva in the gi, one of the basic principles is posture. We need to posture to prevent our opponent from grabbing our sleeve or grabbing our collar, and then we begin to implement our passes. Now, if we look at Lachlan here, he starts in this reverse De La Riva position, and he's hoping that his opponent gives him enough space to switch back to his preferred De La Riva position and begin to enter into his attacks. So if someone like Lachlan has De La Riva and our instinct to pass De La Riva is to posture, we give him all the space in the world to throw his leg around and enter into the backside 50-50 position. So if you compare that to this situation here, where Lachlan is kind of in that reverse De La Riva scenario, and he's unable to switch back to De La Riva because his opponent is pressuring forward and not leaving any space for Lachlan to insert his knee or foot to create that space he needs to get into his attacks. So mistake number 1 is having the instinct to posture, which results in an easy entry into backside 50-50. And this makes sense when you think about a previous video that we did where we talked about how we use upper body attacks to set up lower body entries. So if we're attacking a triangle and our opponent postures to defend that triangle, it leaves us an entry into the legs, because to enter into the legs, what we want is posture. Now again, when we're talking about Muhammad Ali, we're talking about an absolute savage, someone who fights to stay on top of the fight and control the pace of the match at all costs, often leaving their opponent bloodied and battered at the end of the match. Now, when talking about backside 50-50, a correct response is to backstep. But by backstepping, we're voluntarily putting our butt on the ground. So if you think about this from Muhammad Ali's perspective, someone who's the bigger fighter that prefers to play top position is going to have a hard time instinctually backstepping to voluntarily put their butt on the mat. So instead, we end up in this position here where we've already talked about it's very hard to extract your leg because of the sharp bend, and it's very difficult to put weight back onto your opponent because they have the ability to push with that top leg. So now we have a situation where Lachlan on the bottom can take all the time in the world to bring the foot from his bottom shoulder to his top shoulder, wrap the heel, and successfully submit his opponent with a heel hook. So if we compare that to how Gordon handles the situation, we'll see Gordon gets put in that same backside 50-50 scenario, but literally right away, he backsteps. He never gives Lachlan the ability to bring his foot from his bottom shoulder to his top shoulder and successfully wrap his heel. The more you hang out in this backside 50-50 scenario, the more you're giving your opponent the ability to expose your heel. The time to backstep isn't when they already have your heel wrapped, it's when they're transitioning to a position that exposes your heel. Now you'll see once we complete the backstep, we're not by any means out of the situation. We're still in a traditional 50-50 scenario, but we now have the ability to cross our feet, to hand fight, to grab our opponent's head, whatever we need to do to defend the situation. But we're in a much greater position to defend than we were from the backside position. The K-guard entry that Lachlan Giles used in ADCC is a form of an outside spin, where our head spins to the outside of our opponent's legs. The result of an outside spin leads the heel that we're attacking to be on our bottom shoulder. And before we can successfully complete a heel hook, we have to bring it from our bottom shoulder to our top shoulder. And from a defensive standpoint, we can take advantage of the time it takes to bring that foot from our bottom shoulder to our top shoulder and use that time to safely backstep and begin to defend ourselves from a more standard 50-50 scenario. However, if our opponent's head goes in between our legs as they're spinning into the backside 50-50 situation, that is now an inside spin. And the result of an inside spin is that our heel is already on the top shoulder, so it's already completely exposed for our opponent to finish the heel hook. So in summary, backside 50-50 entries like the K-guard entry we saw Lachlan using is harder to do if we're pressuring forward. It's easier to do if we're trying to posture up. And if we allow our opponent to enter into the backside 50-50 position, we have to be ready to backstep right away as they're trying to expose their heel. But if they do an inside spin, my general rule is just to be ready to tap right away if someone's doing an inside spin. Because if you try to aggressively backstep after an inside spin, you're relying on your opponent's poor braking mechanics to allow that backstep. And if they're not being nice to you, you're going to break your own knee, and you're going to have people saying, oh, you did the wrong escape. Why would you backstep from that situation? Well, like we talked about in this video, I think backstepping is the correct response. It's just very dangerous to do if your opponent has already exposed and wrapped your heel. So hope you guys found this video helpful. Please tap if someone does an inside spin on you, and we'll see you in the next video.